Welcome to FlyEaglesFly News, where Eagles fans get the latest, fastest, and hottest updates. Hit subscribe and fly high with us. The atmosphere around Philadelphia has quietly shifted. And even without any official statement, there is a heavy emotional weight hanging over the Eagles organization that fans can almost feel through their screens. Rumors have begun to circulate that Nick Sirianni, the energetic and polarizing head coach who helped define a recent era of the franchise, may be preparing to step away from the sideline sooner than anyone expected. The conversations are not loud yet, but they are persistent. Whispered in studio halls, mentioned cautiously by insiders, and debated passionately by fans who sense that something meaningful is coming to an end. Sirianni has always been more than just a play caller. He became a symbol of belief, accountability, and relentless competitiveness, someone who challenged players to buy into a collective identity rather than individual glory. The sadness surrounding this speculation does not come from disappointment, but from gratitude mixed with uncertainty, because when a leader like this is rumored to leave, it forces everyone to reflect on what was built and what might be lost. The Eagles under Sirianni were known for emotional intensity, sideline passion, and a locker room that felt genuinely united, and that kind of culture is not easy to replicate. Fans are not just reacting to a potential coaching change. They are processing the idea that a familiar voice, a familiar presence, may soon no longer define Sundays in Philadelphia. As these rumors continue to grow, many observers are pointing to subtle signs rather than concrete facts, reading between the lines of press conferences, body language, and the tone of Sirianni's recent comments. He has always spoken with confidence, but lately there is a reflective quality in his words, as if he is taking inventory of his journey rather than looking exclusively toward the future. In Philadelphia, reflection often signals transition, and supporters know this city rarely gets advance warning before emotional shifts occur. The idea of Sirianni leaving feels particularly heavy because of how closely his personality became tied to the team's identity. He was never afraid to defend his players, challenge critics, or lean into the pressure that comes with leading a historic franchise. That courage earned him loyalty inside the building and admiration outside of it. The sadness in this rumor comes from the realization that even successful chapters eventually close, sometimes quietly, without dramatic announcements or farewell tours. Fans remember the early skepticism around his hiring and how he transformed doubt into belief, proving that trust and consistency can overcome noise. Thinking about the Eagles without Sirianni feels strange, almost disorienting, because he became part of the emotional rhythm of the team. There is also a deeper layer to this speculation, one that goes beyond wins or losses and touches on the human side of coaching. At the highest level, leading an NFL franchise demands constant sacrifice, emotional energy, and relentless pressure, especially in a market like Philadelphia where expectations never sleep. Rumors suggest that Sirianni's potential departure may not be about failure, but about timing, burnout, and the natural evolution of a career spent under an unforgiving spotlight. This possibility makes the story even sadder because it frames his exit not as a rejection, but as a personal crossroads. Fans understand that coaches are people first, and the emotional toll of carrying an entire city's hopes can eventually weigh heavier than any contract. The speculation paints Sirianni as someone who gave everything he had, fully committed to the organization, the players, and the vision he preached from day one. If this chapter truly is nearing its end, it will be remembered as a period defined by emotional connection rather than cold calculation. The Eagles were not just coached during this era, they were guided by belief, and that belief leaves a lasting mark inside the locker room. According to whispers rather than confirmed reports, the mood is said to be reflective rather than panicked. Players reportedly respect Sirianni deeply, and many of them credit him for their growth, confidence, and sense of accountability. This is not the type of rumored departure that fractures a team overnight, but one that invites introspection and gratitude. Veterans understand how rare it is to play for a coach who communicates with authenticity and demands excellence without losing empathy. Younger players often speak about how Sirianni empowered them to play freely, while still holding them to a standard. The sadness of this moment lies in the awareness that such relationships are difficult to recreate, especially in a league built on constant change. Even if the Eagles are prepared structurally for a transition, emotionally it is harder to replace a leader who understood the pulse of his roster. Fans reading into this rumor are not just worried about schemes or systems. They are worried about losing a voice, That made players believe in themselves. That kind of influence does not show up on stat sheets, but it defines careers. The city itself seems to be reacting in its own uniquely Philadelphia way. Blending realism with emotional attachment, supporters know that no coach stays forever. Yet that knowledge does not lessen the sting when the possibility becomes real, social. Conversations are filled with memories, favorite moments, and passionate defenses of Sirianni's legacy, even before anything has been officially decided. That reaction alone shows how deeply he connected with the fan base. This was a coach who embraced the city's edge, matched its intensity, and never tried to soften its expectations. The rumor of his departure feels sad because it represents the closing of a shared emotional journey between coach and city. Philadelphia does not fall in love easily. But when it does, the bond runs deep. Sirianni earned that bond through authenticity, resilience, and belief. Losing him, even hypothetically, feels like losing a familiar rhythm that fans had grown comfortable with. Even during moments of chaos, as speculation continues, one thing remains clear: if this truly is the beginning of the end for Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia, his impact will not be measured solely by records or trophies. It will be measured by how players speak about him years later, how fans remember his passion, and how the culture he helped build continues to influence the franchise. The sadness surrounding this rumor is not rooted in fear of the unknown, but in appreciation for what has already been experienced. Eagles fans are not mourning failure. They are bracing themselves for change, and in a sport defined by constant movement, that kind of emotional pause says everything about the coach at the center of the conversation. The second part of this story feels even heavier, because once the idea of departure takes root, the mind naturally begins to imagine what comes next. Rumors suggest that the Eagles organization is already quietly preparing for the possibility of life after Sirianni, not out of disloyalty, but out of responsibility. In a league where planning ahead is essential, even beloved figures are part of long-term calculations. This reality makes the speculation more bittersweet, because it highlights the business side of football colliding with emotional attachment. Sirianni's potential exit would not just mark the end of a coaching tenure, but the beginning of a philosophical transition. For the franchise, whoever follows him would inevitably be compared to the energy, authenticity, and emotional connection he brought to the role. That is not an easy shadow to step into, especially in a city that demands passion as much as performance. The sadness here comes from knowing that transitions, no matter how necessary, often dilute what made a particular era special. There is also speculation about Sirianni himself and what this move might represent. For his personal journey, some believe he may be seeking a pause, a reset, or a different challenge after years of living at full emotional throttle. Coaching at the highest level requires constant self-sacrifice, and stepping away can sometimes be an act of self-preservation rather than defeat. This perspective reframes the sadness into something more human, turning the rumor into a story about balance rather than ambition. Fans who truly appreciate Sirianni's contribution understand that his intensity came at a cost, and if he chooses to step aside, it may be because he gave everything he had. That realization does not erase the disappointment, but it adds depth to the conversation. Instead of anger or frustration, there is empathy, a recognition that even the strongest leaders eventually need space to breathe. From the organizational standpoint, losing Sirianni would mean redefining leadership tone and communication style. He was known for emotional speeches, public accountability, and a visible connection with players during games. Those traits shaped how the Eagles were perceived across the league. The rumor of his departure invites questions about whether the franchise will seek continuity or deliberately pivot toward a different identity. This uncertainty fuels fan anxiety, not because they doubt the front office, but because they understand how fragile culture can be. One wrong hire can unravel years of trust and belief. The sadness tied to this rumor reflects fear of losing not just a coach, but a philosophy that resonated deeply with the locker room and the fan base alike. Supporters are also aware that if Sirianni leaves, it will likely happen without the kind of emotional goodbye that feels deserved. The NFL rarely pauses to honor chapters properly, moving quickly from one storyline to the next. This makes the current speculation feel like a prolonged farewell. Even without official confirmation, fans are already reminiscing, already preparing themselves emotionally, because they know how abruptly these transitions can occur. The idea that Sirianni could one day simply not be there, without a final speech or public celebration, adds to the sadness. It feels unfinished, as if a meaningful story might end mid-sentence. Ultimately, this rumor has less to do with strategy and more to do with legacy. Nick Sirianni's time with the Eagles, whether nearing its conclusion or not, reshaped how the team saw itself and how it was seen by others. The sadness surrounding this speculation is a testament to his impact. Coaches who leave without emotional reaction are easily forgotten. Those whose potential departure stirs reflection, gratitude, and uncertainty leave behind something real as fans wait for clarity. They are not demanding answers as much as they are acknowledging feelings. Change is inevitable, but appreciation is earned, and in Philadelphia, the quiet sadness surrounding this rumor speaks louder than any headline ever could. FlyEaglesFly News family, smash subscribe and hit like. Your support keeps the freshest Philadelphia Eagles updates flying in. Drop your take in the comments and let's talk birds. The emotional weight of this rumor continues to grow precisely because it feels unfinished, like a conversation that nobody wants to end, but everyone knows is coming. Round the Eagles, there is a sense that Nick Sirianni's presence has already shifted from certainty to memory. Even if he is still officially tied to the franchise, fans sense it in the tone of discussions, in the way his name is mentioned with reverence rather than expectation. This is how eras quietly fade, not with dramatic announcements, but with emotional distance forming long before reality catches up. The sadness deepens because Sirianni represented stability in a league defined by impatience. He was not just a coach who drew up plays, but a leader who embraced vulnerability, intensity, and belief as tools for connection. When supporters imagine the sidelines without his constant movement and raw emotion, it feels like watching a familiar landscape slowly change shape. This rumor has become less about whether he leaves and more about what his absence would symbolize. It represents the end of a chapter where emotion was allowed to coexist with discipline, where passion was not criticized but encouraged. Losing that presence feels like losing a voice that spoke directly to the heart of the city. What makes this situation even more emotional is the uncertainty surrounding how history will frame Sirianni's departure if it happens quietly. Philadelphia is a city that values honesty and emotional investment, and Sirianni gave both freely. The rumor of his exit raises fears that his contributions might be absorbed into statistics and timelines instead of stories and memories. Fans worry that without a clear farewell, the significance of his leadership might be reduced to footnotes rather than feelings. This sadness is not rooted in nostalgia alone, but in respect. Supporters recognize that Sirianni challenged players to grow not just professionally, but personally, and that kind of influence rarely gets documented properly. The speculation forces people to confront how quickly the league moves on, even from figures who shaped its emotional landscape. It is painful to think that a coach who poured so much of himself into the organization might leave without the chance for collective closure. That fear lingers in every discussion, adding depth to the sadness surrounding this rumor. As the conversation continues to circulate, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Regardless of how or when Nick Sirianni's time with the Eagles ends, his impact is already secure. The sadness fans feel is not weakness, but proof of connection in sports. Attachment is earned through authenticity. And Sirianni never hid who he was. He leaned into criticism, embraced pressure, and carried himself with a sincerity that resonated deeply in a demanding city. This rumor has opened an emotional space where fans are allowed to appreciate rather than argue, to reflect rather than debate, even without confirmation. Many are already saying thank you in their own way, revisiting moments, remembering speeches, and acknowledging growth. That collective reflection may be the truest measure of a coach's legacy. If this chapter truly is nearing its conclusion, it will not end with anger or disappointment, but with quiet respect and lingering sadness, and sometimes that is the most powerful ending of all. That's a wrap from FlyEaglesFly News. If you want the fastest Eagles updates, subscribe, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Sound off in the comments. Let's talk birds.